Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA Insurance, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Agriland journalist Aisling O'Brien. Well, it's been a busy week and you may be aware that there is a general election campaign underway at the moment, with the main political parties looking to court the farmer vote this week, and we'll come to that in just a few moments. In terms of more immediate news where farmers are concerned, we're going to hit a pretty severe cold snap next week, with the first snowfall of the winter likely on high ground in northern counties. Daytime temperatures will range from 3 to 6 degrees, falling below freezing overnight. Luckily for the Farm Tractor and Machinery Trade Association, they've scheduled their farm machinery show just before the cold snap hit. The show finished up today after 3 days, and you can check out our ongoing coverage of that on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app. But we're going to start this week with huge news in the dairy and agribusiness sector. And that's the €500 million sale of Kerry Group's milk processing business to Kerry Co-op. Aisling, can you take us through the detail on this?
Yes, Charles. So we got confirmation this week from Kerry Group that it had entered into an agreement with Kerry Co-op to sell Kerry Dairy Ireland, its dairy division, to the co-op for a total expected price of €500 million. So initially, Kerry Co-op would acquire a 70% interest in Kerry Dairy Ireland for €350 million, with Kerry Group retaining a 30% stake. The co-op would then have an option to acquire the final 30% stake at any time from the completion of the initial acquisition until the middle of 2030. And on completion of this deal, it would mark a major milestone for milk processing in the southwest, with the co-op maybe going back to its roots in milk processing, and Kerry Group would move to being a pure play global business to business taste and nutrition company. So big changes if this deal goes ahead, but it will all be dependent on the approval of Kerry Group and Kerry Co-op shareholders. Now, both parties are hoping to have the first phase of this deal completed by the end of next January. So I suppose briefly, what is Kerry Dairy Ireland and what would the co-op be buying in its entirety by the end of the decade potentially? Well, they process over 1.1 billion litres of milk annually from 2,740 farms across Munster in 6 dairy manufacturing facilities across Ireland and the UK. It has a range of well-known and popular brands like Cheese Strings, Easy Singles, Lolo and Charleville. It employs over 1,500 staff and exports to over 58 countries, and also comprises a dairy ingredients business. And it also operates 31 agri-services stores across Kerry, Limerick, Clare, North Cork, as well as a feed mill in Farranfore in Kerry. And Kerry Dairy Ireland for the fiscal year of 2023 had revenues of €1.28 billion. That was down from the 1.5 billion in the previous year.
And Aisling, this purchase, how is that going to be funded?
So the co-op currently holds an 11% shareholding in Kerry Group with a value of around €1.7 billion. So this proposed deal would require a share exchange and an associated redemption process. And that would involve co-op shares being acquired by Kerry Group and being redeemed. And then the co-op would cease to be a shareholder in Kerry Group, which would mark another milestone on this journey. So this share exchange, whereby all co-op members would be given new Kerry Group shares in exchange for 85% of their co-op shareholdings, would be at a rate of 6.25 Kerry Group shares per co-op share currently held. Now, these shares in totality have a value of €1.4 billion, and the co-op says that these shares would then be held directly by co-op members, and they could decide what to do with them into the future. And they noted that for Irish residents, there should be no upfront tax charges as a consequence of that transaction, and any tax on capital gains would only come into play should the holder of those shares decide to sell them on into the future. Now, what about the remaining 15% of those shares? Well, they are going to be valued at around €250 million, and they will be reinvested by the co-op to buy that initial 70% stake in Kerry Dairy Ireland. And to make up the balance of the €350 million price tag, there will be loans from banks and also from Kerry Group as well. Now, funding for the final 30% stake in Kerry Dairy Ireland will be a mixture of equity and retained cash in the business, along with debt as well. Now, what we're being told is that every current Kerry Co-op shareholders, the A, B and C shareholders, will be treated the same. They'll all own their portion of Kerry Dairy Ireland in identical fashion. And if the deal secures the approval of shareholders, Kerry Dairy Ireland would have a new board structure, which would reflect the new ownership structure, which would be 7 nominees from the Co-op and 3 from Kerry Group. We're also being told that the business would retain the existing Kerry Dairy Ireland management as well. And the Co-op is saying that the funding model they're putting forward represents a sustainable financial plan which wouldn't overburden the business with debt and retain the ability to invest in growth and also to support milk price as well.
And Aisling, what does this mean for the ongoing milk price arbitration issue there?
Yeah, so one of the big issues for Kerry milk suppliers, and one that was raised at the Kerry Co-op AGM earlier this year, Charles, has been this long-running dispute over arbitration when it comes to leading milk price. So as part of this proposed deal, Kerry Group will establish a €50 million fund for the resolution of this ongoing dispute and related claims. So James Tagney, who is the chair of Kerry Co-op, told me this week that under this fund, there will be a cumulative total of 5.4 cent a litre paid to everyone who supplied milk to Kerry Group in the years from 2015 to 2020 as per their milk supply contract. And it was noted that that payment would be split across that period and it would vary depending on the difference between the price paid by Kerry and the leading milk price in a given year. So this payment, coupled with a €30 million payment made by Kerry Group to suppliers in 2020, Tagney told me, equates to 81% of the total arbitration claim on leading milk price by suppliers. So the Co-op, he said, considers this to be a good outcome and a win for milk suppliers as they are achieving 81% of what was sought. And the payment will be dependent on the first phase of this joint venture deal being completed, and it will be made as per the terms of the milk supply contract, as I said. Now, Charles, speaking to some milk suppliers this week, some of them aren't happy that this arbitration has been linked to the larger joint venture proposal. They feel it should be separate. They're also unhappy that this payment is for milk supplied as per their contract, as opposed to all milk supplied over the period. I suppose if they went over that supply, I suppose if their contract is 400,000 litres and they supplied 500,000, this payment will only refer to the 400,000 litres, and they feel that previous top-up payments didn't have this stipulation, so they're a bit unhappy about this. And also as part of this deal as well, Kerry Group is going to be entitled to a fixed dividend of €7.5 million per annum during the period of the joint ownership. And James Tagney said that this fixed dividend will give greater certainty to the board in managing this Kerry Dairy Ireland business and in setting milk supply, or milk price as well, I should say. Now, after closing, the new board of Kerry Dairy Ireland is going to determine the milk price going forward, and he said with the intention of paying the maximum price achievable to its milk supplying members. Now, another part of the deal is a 1 cent a litre participation contribution, which will apply to all milk supplies over a 5-year period as a means of paying back these loans. And James Tagney said that this contribution can be looked at again by the board in the future, as business models that they've run up to this point are very conservative. Some farmers unhappy about this contribution payment as well, without the guarantee of a dividend or maybe the option to share up in this new entity as well, Charles. So a lot of concerns are out there as well about maybe how this might impact newer entrants as well into milk supplying. So I think there's lots to be trashed out over the coming weeks, that's for sure.
And Aisling, this will require shareholder approval as well. Will you explain how that works?
Yeah, so there's going to be a special general meeting of Kerry Co-op taking place on Monday, the 16th of December in Killarney. Now, the Co-op said the proposed transaction will only proceed if they get approval from the required 66% of A and B shareholders who are present at that meeting. There will be no postal vote. And the Co-op is embarking on a series of information meetings over the coming weeks across the catchment, which is Kerry, Limerick, Clare and North Cork, in a bid to secure support from shareholders. More details on those meetings, you can find those on our website and app. And all shareholders, including C shareholders who won't have a vote, have been encouraged to come to the meetings. And it will be very interesting to see what comes out, what issues are raised by suppliers and for all different types of shareholders, because I suppose, Charles, everybody's situation is unique, as it would be in most agribusiness situations. They could be milk suppliers, they could be dry shareholders, they could be people coming out of milk. So this deal may appeal or it may not, depending on on where you are in terms of your shareholding in Kerry Co-op. And then from a Kerry Group point of view, there's going to be an extraordinary general meeting held for their shareholders to vote on the 19th of December. So a lot to come between now and then.
Thanks for taking us through those details, Aisling. And just while we're on the issue of dairy business, we have one milk price announced for October to bring you so far as of the recording of this podcast. Lakeland Dairies has decided to increase its base price, paying 49.6 cent per litre at standard constituents and paying 40.8 pence per litre to suppliers in Northern Ireland. Now, if it wasn't for that Kerry Dairy Ireland development this week, our podcast today would have been dominated with general election coverage. But that's where we're going to move on to now. Political parties have hit the roads of Ireland looking to pick up farmer and rural votes, and as part of that, they called into the Irish Farmers Association's offices in Dublin this week to set out their stall for those farmers in attendance. So Aisling, can you tell us who said what?
Yes, so on Tuesday there was a national meeting of the IFA as part of the general election campaign, and it was addressed by Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin, Fine Gael leader Simon Harris and Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald, who all attended and set out their stall for farmers as the courting and the wooing of the farmer and rural vote continues ahead of polling day on November 29th. Here's some of what they had to say.
It's really important that we listen to farmers, engage with farmers. I've been involved in doing that now for quite a while, both as a TD in Wicklow, but also since I became Taoiseach, I've made a very conscious effort to travel around agricultural shows and really try and ensure that my party reconnects and renews its partnership with farmers right across Ireland. I think we have to press reset on the relationship with farmers. I definitely know from speaking to farmers that they feel that they're talked at and talked down to far too often. And this is a point I'll be making today. There's a climate emergency in the world, there's no doubt about that. The planet is on fire, there needs to take action. But the responsibility for all that doesn't fall to farmers. And I hear politicians talking about farming in a way they wouldn't talk about any other part of the Irish economy. So we have to help farmers, we have to help them transition, we have to help them produce, because yes, we need to take climate action, but we also need to produce food. It's a really important part of our Irish economic model. And at a time when the risk of a transatlantic trade shock is rising, and the impact that can have on foreign direct investment in Ireland and in Europe, it's more important than ever that we support Indigenous Irish business. There's nothing more Indigenous than Irish farming.
I always look forward to meeting with you, Francie, and with the IFA, and particularly in these election settings, because I think they illustrate the importance of engagement with what is Ireland's key Indigenous industry. Food security is vital for Ireland's future, and the investment and development of Irish agriculture and food production is a key priority of the Fianna Fáil party. I was here 4.5 years ago. We made commitments in terms of a food regulator, for example, and we followed through in it. Charlie McConnell brought in the legislation. That is now up and running. We have a regulatory framework there that we can advance and strengthen into the future in the interests of the primary producer. But I'm looking forward to the engagement on a whole range of issues which can give sustainability and less volatility in terms of farm incomes over the next period.
We're looking forward to sharing our views, but more importantly to hearing from you on the pressing issues for this election, the manifesto commitments that we're making, but more broadly beyond the election, the future of Irish agriculture, in particular the future of the family farm and young people in farming. These are two things that we want to talk about and we want to hear from yourselves on.
So that is what the leaders of the main political parties had to say in advance of the meeting. Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin made a commitment to farmers, Charles, to oppose the Mercosur deal and said it makes no sense to facilitate the importation of goods produced to much lower standards in terms of the environment. He said the deal couldn't be supported in its current form and that discussions are continuing. And he said he would stand by the record of his government in supporting farmers. He pointed to the Acres scheme and the establishment of the agri-food regulator as well. And he said that he wanted the country to move to an agenda of permanent security for farming and for the expansion of the agri-food industry as well. And he pointed to the election manifesto of his party, which provides over €280 million per year in new funding for agriculture. Fine Gael leader Simon Harris again made a commitment to farmers that he'll do whatever can be done to retain the nitrates derogation. He said it's an absolute national asset. He said there also needs to be improvements from other sectors like Irish water and from forestry as well, something we've heard previously. And he said if he was the Taoiseach in the next government, he will chair that Cabinet Committee on Water Quality announcement we talked about previously here on the podcast. When it comes to Mercosur, he said that the deal couldn't be accepted or supported in its current form. Now, Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou McDonald was slightly different in her take on Mercosur, ruling it out entirely. She didn't feel that there was any room for negotiation when it came to Mercosur because she felt that it was regressive and offers nothing positive for Ireland at all. And she said waiting for negotiations to conclude on an additional legal instrument for a bad trade deal will not reduce the damage that Mercosur could cause to the environment and to farmers as well. And she did point to her party, if it was put into power, it would fight for an increased budget for CAP. And she said that they would also deliver an enhanced and simplified suckler payment for beef farmers, and there would also be payments for sheep farmers as well. So look, there's a lot of promises being made, but there's a lot of asks as well, because it is a general election campaign, and the IFA published its general election manifesto calling on the next government to prioritise the competitiveness of the agriculture sector. Their asks are summarised in an acronym called CENTRAL, which covers CAP, the environmental scheme, also known as ACRES, the nitrates derogation, trade deals, regulation, additional funding for vulnerable sectors, and the land tax. And I suppose one of their interesting things is calling for a complete overhaul of the ACRES scheme, and they're calling for a new environmental scheme similar to REPS, which was popular with a lot of farmers out there, with a minimum payment of €15,000 per farm. So a lot there, and full details of that manifesto on our website and app.
Moving on now, and the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation has confirmed that it is working on having all weights recorded under the Suckler Carbon Efficiency Programme available for use in the Eurostar evaluations. Aisling, this is significant news for suckler farmers. Can you take us through the details?
Yes, so this week our colleague Breffney O'Brien, our technical beef specialist, brought us the story that ICBF has recently made available information on the volume of weight-related data that's currently included in its evaluations. So the ICBF has said that data used in the national cattle evaluations is sourced from marts, factories and on-farm weighing, and this is where SCEP comes into play. And the ICBF CEO Sean Coughlin explained to Agriland that weights recorded by farmers for SCEP are not currently used in the evaluations, but weights recorded by technicians are used. Now, I understand that when it comes to on-farm weighing, about 10% of on-farm weighing would be done by technicians and the remaining 90% by farmers. And following a query from Agriland, Coughlin confirmed that work, as you said, is ongoing to have all SCEP weights available for use in the Eurostar evaluations, and the aim is to have that completed next year. And the inclusion of SCEP weights, he said, is part of a suite of improvements that are currently in the research phase. And he said it's very important that ICBF can stand over the evaluations that it produces. And he said at any time that a large amount of new data is included, the evaluations will change. And if the star ratings on a farmer's animals go down, they will want to understand why. And he said that's fair and reasonable, but we must also be able to stand over the reason why they have changed as well. And he said that's why they're doing a lot of validation work on the weights and the subsequent evaluation. Now, the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, Charles, has been very strongly critical of ICBF this week for excluding calf weight data collected by farmers under SCEP from their genetic evaluations. And the chair of the Suckler Committee with the association, Jimmy Cosgrave, said that farmers had been angered to learn that weight data that they'd collected under the programme is not included in genetic evaluations. He said that farmers diligently weigh cattle as part of SCEP, and they fully expected the data that they collected to contribute directly to ICBF's genetic evaluations. And he said that the ICSA doesn't accept the ICBF's ICBF's reasoning for excluding farmer-collected data. He said that the ICBF's claim that the data must pass through a series of quality control checks before it's eligible for inclusion and that they're working on validating weights rings hollow. He said that SCEP is a fully audited, cap-funded scheme, and if the weights meet all of the Department of Agriculture and EU audit standards for payments, it's baffling that ICBF considers them insufficient for genetic evaluations. And he said that farmers are rightly angered that the data that they collect is being ignored. And we did get confirmation from the Department of Agriculture this week as well, Charles, that about 15,500 herds participating in SCEP had submitted valid weights by the deadline of November 1st. And just before we leave SCEP, Charles, I'm like a broken record, a reminder that the deadline for the completion of the mandatory training under SCEP falls tomorrow, the 15th of November. So make sure you get that done tonight if you can. It's an online course, and get it completed because it is part of the terms and conditions of the scheme.
We're going to stay on the beef side of the house now. And Aisling, you were recently speaking to one of the most important players in the organic beef processing sector on how things are in the organic meat sector at present and where it can go in the future. We know that there is some frustration there among organic farmers in terms of the differential, or lack thereof, between organic beef prices and conventional prices. So what did you learn?
Yes, so this was comments made by John Purcell, the managing director of the organic beef processor Good Herdsman, which of course is owned by ABP, while he was addressing the recent BioFarm conference held in Limerick. Now, he told the conference that prices for Irish organic beef should reach up to €6.60 a kg by next March, and a steady supply of cattle is needed as well to meet demand. He said that in Ireland, only around 2% of the national herd of 6.5 million bovines is organic, including dairy animals. And that is compared to an average of 8.6% across the EU. So he said that shows the scope for increasing organic beef in this country. Now, Good Herdsman was established back in 1989 as a marketing platform for Irish organic livestock farmers. It's currently slaughtering around 10,000 organic cattle and feeds about 1,200 cattle per year to support shortfalls in supply. And John Purcell said that they are looking forward to the forecasted increases in organic beef that lie ahead because of obviously the increase in farmers getting into the organic farming scheme as well. Now, he said that there is markets out there. There's well-established markets. About 70% of Irish organic beef is currently being exported. He said that Good Herdsman has supply agreements with top supermarket chains across Europe, and that those shelves would offer up more space if we have more produce to offer. And also Good Herdsman is serving the European baby food industry for over a decade now, and there could possibly be some room for growth in that sector as well. Now, he did note, you mentioned conventional prices there. He said conventional beef prices had reached unprecedented levels and continued to buck seasonal trends, which is likely to continue into next year. And as a result, he said Good Herdsman pricing models for the last 2 months of 2024 looked out of sync with the rest of the industry. And that has been amended. So they basically added 25 cents a kg to the template price, which should make the price end up at around €6 a kg by Christmas. And he said that Good Herdsman would continue to offer 3-month pricing templates, and it's expected that prices in the first 6 months of 2025 would be up 8% on the same period this year. And he said that we should reach about €6.50, €6.60 a kg by March of 2025. Now, he did outline the different margins that were achieved by different beef finishing systems, and he did point to issues maybe when it came to winter finishing and the need to instill maybe more confidence in that. And he said that Good Herdsman would be seeking to improve confidence across all different finishing systems when it came to organic beef. And, you know, along with saying that the markets are there, he also said the capacity is there as well to, you know, there's an estimated slaughtering of maybe 20,000 finished beef cattle available in 2025. And he said the industry can handle that amount, but he does say that we should maybe try and make sure that that's a 52-week supply across the whole year, as opposed to maybe certain times of the year where lots of cattle are coming out and then there's a drop off in supply in others. So interesting words there from John Purcell on organic beef.
We're going to end this week on a heartwarming story from County Waterford, where residents in one village took it on themselves to reopen their local pub over a year after it closed. Can you tell us more about this, Aisling?
Yeah, this is a lovely story from our colleague Caroline Allen this week. Houghton's Pub, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's 5 miles outside the village of Kilmeaden, halfway between Kilmeaden and Kilmacthomas on the Waterford Greenway. And the pub is believed to date back 200 years, but around 14 months ago, the owners decided to call time on their running of the pub. But now 13 loyal customers have banded together, Charles. They've come together to reopen their local, which they said was a huge loss to the local community. So they put their money where their mouth is. They put the money into the pot to carry out essential work and to lease out the premises. And the shareholders all bring their own skill sets to this venture, but actually none of them are barmen, which is very interesting, Charles. They'd rather be on the other side of the bar. Ross Kavanagh, who's one of these 13, told us. But he said the aim was to get the pub open and to cover the costs. And they were nervous about the undertaking, but the support and the reaction has been tremendous. And local bars and businesses have provided advice and loans of equipment. And, they've managed to get them up and running. There's no long-term plans at the moment, but they're just happy to have their little pub with a big character open, is what Ross said. And there seems to be a great tradition of sing-songs in this pub, playing cards, a real, I suppose, harking back to the days before, what's the Wi-Fi code, barman? There is no Wi-Fi in this pub, so it is a real social spot for the locality, and fair play to everybody for coming together to make this happen, and we wish them a lot of success. I believe there's a lot of bookings coming in for Christmas parties, Charles, as well, so the future looks bright, so fair play to everybody involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely, Aisling. That unfortunately brings us to the end of the show. Just before we go, we just wanted to turn your attention to a story you can check out on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app at the moment, which is on research showing which county in Ireland is the best to start a farm business. So some very interesting findings there. We also want to let you know that the latest episode of our sister podcast, AgriFocus, is now available, featuring IFA Animal Health Chairperson TJ Maher. The latest episode is all about TB and TB eradication, so it's essential listening for cattle farmers, and it's available on Agriland now. But that's where we'll leave it for today. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling and myself, mind the weather and have a good weekend.